In 2011, the government exhibited a lot of political goodwill and political initiative and passed a law to change the administration of Kampala City. The administration was a local government, typical local government with political leaders also being the executives. And for the last so many years, about half a decade, the city degenerated in terms of service delivery, infrastructure, and everything you can think of. I think the KCCA, Kampala City Council then, was probably the worst run institution probably on Earth and on a few other planets. I could not imagine how government had let it operate in that state for so many years. My job was to turn it around, to transform it, transform service delivery, basically do miracles after half a decade plus of dysfunctionality. So the law had to change and therefore created the position of executive director and a technical team to be the executive in charge of the capital city. We still have politicians, but their work is mainly policy and oversight and ceremonial functions, which they don't want to accept, but that's the law. And we came in. I was appointed by His Excellency, the President of Uganda. So we came in basically with nothing. There was no structure, there was no budget, there was no staff, there was basically nothing. I was the only employee of the organization for a full year without a salary, thank you very much, and a lot of challenges. But we started anyway because I wanted to be part of the transformation of our capital city. Everybody was embarrassed by its state and complaining, and here was an opportunity for me to make a contribution to improve our capital city. So I said, I'll see what I can do. So we put in place a new structure, new job roles, new job titles, new pay structure, new vision, new mission, new strategic plan, and disengaged all the former staff, which was a very interesting process, disengaging over 500 people, no matter who they were related, connected to, upwards, sideways, and wherever, we disengaged them and recruited afresh. Some of them came back, others did not come back because the whole setting had changed. We then hired very, very professional people, motivated people, people that wanted to be part of the transformation of the capital city. And the average age of our team was 31, 32, which was very unusual in public service, especially in Africa, where entry age is about 35. So I had to convince the appointing authorities that it was okay to employ people below 30 because they had a vision, they had the energy, they had what I needed to do the difficult job of transforming the city. We applied best practices, best practice corporate systems in a government institution and began to see very, very good results. We applied best practice in planning, in implementation, in assessment. We used non-conventional methods of doing our work. We use modern methods of performance management and appraisals, tooling, and all sorts of innovation. And the charge I gave to my staff, we have a city transform, go for it. If you have an innovation, let me know. I'll give you all the support you need. Just go for it. And they began to do amazing things. The revenue was mostly manual. We made it electronic in terms of assessment, collection, accounting. And in the first 5 years, we had grown the revenue by 186%, and now reaching 200%, which revenue we needed to fund the programs that we're doing in the city. We enhanced the motivation packages, of course, for staff, and service delivery began improving. The sanitation of the city, the services in the city, the health, the education. We have 79 schools with over about 80,000 children in the school that we manage. We have prisons, we have markets, we have the transport sector, we have the public hospitals and everything under our docket. So public service delivery started improving. We started building new infrastructure, and automated a lot of the business processes, which were manual, disengaged contractors who were not doing a good job and got new contractors. They didn't like me very much for it, but I got the results I wanted. And we put up principles of zero tolerance to corruption, because corruption was the reason that the institution fell to the depth that it had. So we started dealing with corruption very, very firmly and sent a message across. I always tell my staff, I will be with you on anything you do. I'll support you. I'll protect you. I'll be with you. But if you're implicated in corruption, you're on your own. So that is a message that they have all picked up. We also started engaging the public in different strategic activities through effective communication, set up social media platforms. I think we have 7 now. We set up radio programs, TV, media, community engagements, and so on. And the public started coming on board, coming from a position of suspicion. Does she know what she's doing? Is she half crazy? Why does she think she can do it? Eventually, they started buying in, and we started seeing the results. We started getting unqualified audit opinions, which had never happened. That means the Auditor General and all the auditors found nothing hair-raising in our financial accountability. We also got a grade A credit ranking from the World Bank after studying our financial systems. We got highly satisfactory client satisfaction results from the surveys that we've been doing, and started getting development support from everywhere, because the institution had now gained credibility, so people wanted to deal with us. They knew we would account, they knew we had teams that would carry out the projects, and they started bringing in their support, both locally and internationally, and even individuals. I think KCCA is the only institution I know of government where private individuals, private companies in Uganda actually give money towards implementing government projects. That's a very big endorsement for us in terms of the institutional credibility. We therefore reversed the decline and started on a very, very strong upward trajectory in the city. We have been recognized all over the world for the work that we're doing, and even locally and in the region, because people see Kampala as an example, as a template of transformation, and it has become a benchmark for so many. And you'd think it's very exciting. Yes, it is very exciting, very energizing, very good for the people. But it has taken so much out of us because you are dislodging interest, you are dislodging cartels, you are dislodging practices. It has also been a very, very high risk assignment. So you come to acknowledge that people threatening to kill you is part of the job, and you're like, it's become part of the job. People will threaten to kill you, they'll attempt to kill you, they'll hurt staff, they have poisoned staff, they have attacked staff on the streets, to the point where all the management team has to move around with armed security all the time, including their residences. It's sort of weird when you think, I'm the good guy here. Why are they trying to kill me? I thought I was the good guy here. But that's the terrain in which we work when we're trying to put transformation in place, because people that had access to resources and property in the city were being pushed out. We were reclaiming property that had been taken by all sorts of strange people, helped themselves to property buildings in the city, so we're claiming it back, taking them to court and being really, really firm with them, and they did not like that. The contractors were terminating had worked in the institution for 20 plus years, doing a lousy job. We fired them. They didn't like it. So no wonder the threats were quite high. So we have to work through with many layers of security to make sure we can focus on the job. But sometimes the layers are not where they should be. Like the day I found a strange man standing outside my bedroom door in the night. I was like, okay, yeah, where did you pass? But he had come in. So it's that serious. Governance, policy, legislation, those are the areas in which, the parameters in which you operate to do what we do. And many times we have found challenges with policymakers, legislators, because the same people who make the policy and legislation are the same people who resist the implementation. So my thoughts are that before policymakers and legislators pass policies, I think maybe they need to do an impact assessment, a risk assessment. What will the impact be, and do we have the guts to take the impact? Because otherwise we impact people as implementers, and then the policymakers and politicians do not like the impact. But we believe that what we're doing is good because it's based on the law. And if policies and laws and legislations are passed and handed over to implementers like us, expect us to use them. Sometimes you think, so why did you pass this law if you did not want us to implement it? But that is a challenge that we've always been facing. And we've urged legislators, policymakers to support us as we implement legislation, because selective application of the law kills compliance. And many times they ask you, oh, this one is my relative or my friend or my partner, please do not apply the same law. And we're saying either everybody complies or no one will be required to comply. Otherwise, it opens up the system to corruption, to bad practices, and those kinds of things. The political barriers that are thrown in the way many times frustrate the implementers and disable us in doing our work. So the politicians have a role, and I know many of you may be working with politicians or are politicians. You have a very, very key role in development at whatever level. The other thing, I know that many of you may have been doing research, working with developing countries and so on, but one of the things that you have to come to face with is even the policies that we're using right now as developing countries. We're seeing laws and regulations handed down by the colonial masters, public service standing orders. There's something called public service standing orders. If you look in the history books, you'll find it. Well, we're still applying it in our countries. And you cannot use public service standing orders handed down 70, 80 years ago to the current situation with cyber crime and the e-commerce and fraud and all these things that come with the cyber age that we're working with. But those are things that impact on development in our countries and need to be reviewed and changed to meet the needs of the citizens and the countries that we come from. I also found that, or you may have also noticed that when you go to deal with governments, I don't know how it is in the UK, but you find that the boards that handle and make decisions to do with public service, employment, appointments, and so on, are comprised of distinguished, retired gentlemen and ladies. Some of whom, if you come from where I come from, need their grandkids to help them do basic things like set up an email account. Now, they're making decisions about the public service to address the issues of today. Those are the challenges that we face every day. Because we cannot respond to the modern day challenges or be competitive in development if we do not up our policies and legislation to meet the needs of today. One of the challenges I keep throwing out, why don't we, as developing countries, adopt the practices of the successful companies that we deal with today? If we're dealing with Bill and Melinda Gates to fund projects in Kampala, what are the practices that have made Bill and Melinda Gates so successful? Can we adopt those practices, say for HR, for assessment of performance, and so on? Why are we sticking to something that doesn't work? There have been reviews in public service, reviews after reviews after reviews, and I know some of you may have been part of those reviews and restructuring, but there's a fundamental defect with the policies many times that needs to be addressed before we can have a successful implementation and transformation of public service and service delivery. We, as governments, I'm now speaking as a government employee, we have bigger budgets than a lot of private companies. but the budget is applied to things that do not directly translate into results and service delivery improvements, and that is an area that needs to be reviewed. We also, as Africa, invest a lot of funds in training, equipping, skilling our people all over the world. There are Ugandans that come to great institutions like Oxford and Harvard and Yale and so on, all over the world, and institutions in Uganda, and they come with qualities to enable us to change. But if the policymakers and politicians do not allow them to implement what they have learned, then we shall miss out on the investment that we've made in these people. They're able to analyze the situation because they understand the culture, the setting and everything, and they're able to come up with innovative solutions that will transform our countries. We have done it in KCCA, and I believe that template can work for any other country, any other institution in the developing world today. We adopted the practices away from the main public service, but we are seeing great results. So why aren't these great results used as a basis for adopting the practices which have been homegrown in institutions like ours? Otherwise, we'll have a continuous flow of our talent to the West, which is already developed, where they have predictable, modern, and good, up-to-date systems, whether of performance, assessment, reward, and so on. We also spend a lot of time coming to meetings like this and others, benchmarking and so on. African brothers and sisters, you know that. But we go home and we cannot implement what has gone wrong. Policy, politics, and us as the technical implementers need to review what we're doing. Otherwise, we'll spend time in this meeting, and then next year we'll be back, and then we'll go to a couple of other meetings before that, but we'll not see the results on the ground. We can transform Africa, but we can only do it if we are allowed to transform Africa. And for you that are working with developing countries, these are things that you have to put in context, because otherwise the investment you're making, the research you're doing, the efforts you're putting in place to try and address socio-economic development issues in Africa and other developing countries will not yield the expected results. Things like governance, corruption, and all those settings I've mentioned need to be addressed if our developing countries are going to move from where they are today. And otherwise, they encumber, they frustrate, and they slow down development. Ladies and gentlemen, 2 weeks ago, I resigned from my position as Executive Director of Kampala. And yes, handed my resignation to His Excellency, the President of Uganda. And the question is why? Why, when we're doing such a great job? I'll leave you with that thought, that we as Africans have everything we need, whether it's natural resources, brain capacity, energy, innovation, understanding the terrain, the vision, the ambition to transform Africa. But we can only transform it to the extent that our colleague Africans allow us to. Thank you.